Hello everyone, I'm meteorologist Chesley McNeil here to update you with the latest information that we just received from the Hurricane Center on Hurricane Ian. And not much of a change. The storm has lost a little bit of its wind speed moving across the peninsula, but starting to move now over into the warm waters of the Gulf. And that's where we'll start to see it begin to intensify. It is forecast to become a Category 4 hurricane. Right now, the status is at a Category 3. Now, you're looking at this map here. You can see where Atlanta is at the top, just under the banner there. That storm is just now coming off the coast of Cuba. So, ways away from our area. We are not anticipating seeing the effects of any of this until we get to about Friday. So, we still have some days, but want to update you on where the storm is, how that path is going, because it has been changing the last couple of days. Yesterday's time, we were talking about mainly a northerly track. Now, it's starting to veer just a little bit to the east, and I'll show you the latest track from the Hurricane Center in just a minute. Just want to show you this well-defined eye wall here that has been really moving through western portions of Cuba and creating some havoc, as you would imagine. Look at that well-defined eye. You can see the intensity around that. That's where we have those sustained winds up to about 115 miles per hour. But as it pushed in, or made landfall this morning, those winds were up to 125 miles per hour. Gusts now around 140 miles per hour. You can see the outer bands that extend all the way up into the Florida Keys, into southern Florida as well. Some intense rainfall has been falling there. Let me widen out a little bit and you can see how massive this storm really is, affecting Miami, where it only takes a little bit of rain, of course, there, and they would experience flooding, some flooding that would take place there. We're going to continue to watch this because as the storm continues to push into those warmer waters, we're expecting it to intensify. And now that it's making more of an easterly jog, looks like it's going to make landfall maybe a little bit south of Tampa. That's the possibility of this hurricane. You see the hurricane warnings for parts of Cuba. It extends to the extreme western portions of the Keys and right along the Florida coastline, the west coast there, from Tampa all the way down to Inglewood, almost where we have those hurricane warnings. South of that, where you see the blue, that is the tropical storm warning. Now, here is the latest track from the Hurricane Center. Again, winds at 115 miles per hour, gust as high as 140. It's moving to the north, has slowed down just a touch. Now moving to the north at about 10 miles per hour. We've seen it as high as 13, 14 miles per hour. Now, it will pick up some forward speed, I believe, as it moves over those waters as well and head right toward the western coast of Florida. And even with this track now, it's a little bit further down to the south of the Tampa area, making landfall right there south of Tampa, and then continuing to head further up the coast, or up toward the coast, the west coast, as you can see, but it kind of bends back before it hits the water there. There are some models that show it moving out to sea and then coming back in. So there's a little bit of a swing as the storm makes landfall, and that landfall will take place late on Wednesday going into Thursday morning. That's the time frame right now, but making it into central Florida and then making its way further up the peninsula, headed toward the Georgia area, where it should begin to lose some of its strength and characteristics. But now you see even more of an easterly jog than we had the last time around, where now parts of our state are almost out of the cone of uncertainty. Now, when we talk about the cone of uncertainty, if you look at the white outlines around that center red line there, that gives you an indication of where the storm could veer. And so if it veers even more to the east, you know, that center line would be more outside of Jacksonville, more toward the water, over toward the Charleston area. If it veers more toward the west, it could come up toward Atlanta. And we've been looking at models early on that showed the storm kind of hugging the west coast of Florida, sliding straight north and then moving up toward our way. But this is more of that easterly jog, and that front that's down there does have something to say about that. All right, so it's bumping the storm over toward the east just a little bit, and then it heads a little bit further off to the north. Certainly the storm will weaken somewhat as it moves up the coast, or up along the west side, the east coast of Florida, as it gets a little bit closer there. And so it will weaken somewhat as it begins to push into our state. Now, the timing for that would be late Friday going into Saturday, and then by Sunday that area of low pressure starts to move out just a little bit. And so this is the latest track, and it has changed just slightly. Again, each run It's just slightly more toward the east is what we've been seeing, which is also making it make landfall a little bit south of the Tampa area. So that's something that we need to watch out for. Take a look at these models, and here's why the cone of uncertainty is like it is. All right, and so you notice it stays intact. Models are pretty much in agreement with the storm making its way into the Gulf and then making its way over toward the Tampa area. So a lot of models following that path. You see the outliers way over toward the east got a couple there, and then some way over toward the west where it would just move straight north. Once it gets up into, let's say, northern parts of Florida into South Georgia, notice how wide apart those models are, and then it continues to push up to the north. So again, there's the potential for that to take place, and so that's why we're watching it very closely, because that track really will determine the intensity, the impacts, I should say, or intensity of the rainfall and the winds that we would receive here in our area. Speaking of the winds, here's a probability map, and it shows that same path that the the Hurricane Center is saying right now, and you can see where it moves a little bit further over toward the east, now making its way up toward the Jacksonville area and then up to the north. And notice the winds. The greatest risk for those tropical storm winds would be down toward the Jacksonville area and then to the right side of that tropical storm, or that center of circulation. On the backside of that, or the west side of that, where you find North Georgia, if you look at Atlanta, for example, very low threat for winds up to 30 miles per hour plus. Very low threat for that. So if it stays on this particular course, that's less of an impact we see, especially when it comes to the winds. I do think we'll still experience some of the rainfall from this. And again, that'll be Friday night going into Saturday, but the winds, not as much of an impact. All right, what you're looking at right now is what I call a model comparison. These are two of the models that we really focus in on, the European model and the American model. First thing you look at is how in sync these two models are. All right, some would say that the European model is the one to follow. It's a little bit more powerful, and so forth and so on. Some like the American model because of its long range capabilities. But take a look at this. They're both in sync as the storm moves into the Gulf. Very strong as far as the pressure goes. When you look at those tight bars close together like that, you're talking about very low pressure. And so probability of it becoming a Category 4 hurricane is certainly high on both models. It continues to push further off to the north, and the same landfall, right? Same area we're looking at. Once a storm makes landfall, then it starts to weaken a little bit. So you're going to watch that center that we've been looking at really start to spread apart now, all right, losing some of its strength. But this is also where the models start to differ a little bit. And so if you look at the American model, that's the one in green, you notice how it lags a little bit behind that European model. The European model bringing the storm a little bit further to the north than the American model, where it lags back behind. Now that has to do with timing as well. Which one of these would we follow, right? Once it makes landfall, does it lag behind like the American model, or the European model shoots that storm right on up toward the Jacksonville area and then continues to push further to the north? And notice now both models bring that center of circulation, or that area of low pressure, back to the west, okay? Back toward the Atlanta metro area on both of these, one just lagging behind the other. And so again, this is why you have that cone of uncertainty, because there are some models that believe that it will begin to push back toward the west, which would mean for us a little bit more as far as the impacts go. So you're talking maybe a little bit more in the way of rainfall, or our winds would pick up just a little bit more. One of the things that we have experienced, and something that a lot of our viewers here, at least in the North Georgia area, are familiar with, is when tropical storms move in, those winds create problems for us. There's a lot of trees around here, all right? And so when you have that very heavy rainfall that's coming down, that Atlantic moisture or Gulf moisture that comes in, you get that wind that kicks up as well. You can get a lot of trees down, a lot of limbs down. Again, right now, it doesn't look like it'll be that intense if it stays just to the east of our areas, but it's something that we have to watch. So here's what you need to know, which is why we're tracking this storm this far out. Our days have been great here, and I don't want you to overlook the fact that our weather is very nice, but here's what we need to know. So wind and rain would be our major impacts, okay? I think less of the way of the wind, and here's why. If it makes a central Florida landfall, that means those winds will be weaker. The storm will be weaker by the time it gets up to us, because again, once it makes landfall and it moves along the land, it really starts to lose rapidly a lot of its characteristics. A lot of the wind starts to die out of it. It rains, or it dumps a lot of heavy rain along the land. So it would be dumping that heavy rain, we'll say from the Orlando area right on up to Jacksonville, and then has to move into the southern portions of the state. So it should weaken. We can see those impacts as early as Thursday as far as the clouds go. I think the clouds from the outer bands will start to move over our area. In fact, even tomorrow, I think we'll see some high thin clouds. We have nothing out there right now, but high thin clouds, and then thicker clouds on Thursday. And then by Friday, some of that rain will start to move in, especially in the southern portions of the state. And then that will begin to spread back to the north. I think the heaviest rain will be around on Saturday. If it stays on the current trajectory and timing, the heaviest rain should be in our area by Saturday. Now, when I say heavy rain, I'm not talking about 5, 6, 7 inches of rainfall. We're talking maybe closer to the 1.5, maybe 2 inches of rainfall. There could be some localized heavier amounts, but on this particular path that I just showed you. And so if you look at our in-house model here, it shows nothing but sunshine around for today. We're looking great, folks. Mostly sunny skies out there, very comfortable temperatures as well. I don't want you to overlook this, so I'm just going to include this in our update here because, again, we're sitting pretty here. You notice those clouds starting to increase a little bit as we head into Wednesday. And notice the rainfall starts to move up toward the Jacksonville area as we head into Thursday. Some of that starting to come into the southern portions of our state as we get into early Friday. Now, our particular model keeps that storm really close to the east coast of Florida, up there by the Jacksonville area. If it remains out to sea like that, that means that it would stay a little bit further away from our area. And if it moved mainly up toward the northeast, well, that means all bets are off as far as what we would receive around here. But the timing for us right now, again, looks to be late Friday going into Saturday as far as when we would see that the effects from this storm. And keep in mind, again, this is a huge storm. As you can see, the eye itself, the center of circulation down by Cuba, you can't even see what's south of that, right? Because the radar's not picking that part up, but you know, there's a lot of heavy rain there. Again, on the east side of that eye wall, or the right side of that eye wall, is where you get a lot of the storm surge, which is what Cuba is experiencing right now. Even in the South Florida, the Florida Keys as well, experiencing some of that storm surge. That would be on the right side of that storm. So the same would be for us as far as our coast goes. Once we get into Thursday and Friday, that onshore flow will create some issues, especially for places like Savannah, Tybee Island, those places. Once we get into Thursday going into Friday, as that storm begins to, or continues to make its way further off to the north. So we'll continue to follow that for you and update you as we go along. I want to let you look at the track once again, the official track from the National Hurricane Center. It shows a Category 3 hurricane becoming a Category 4 later on today, and then possibly making landfall just to the south of the Tampa Bay area, and then as a Category 3 hurricane. But that will be on Wednesday night into Thursday morning. It moves inland, and then it begins to hook further off to the north. But notice how far east it actually goes on this particular track, this updated track, almost to the shoreline there before it begins to move up toward the Jacksonville area, possibly as a tropical storm by then. Once it moves into Georgia, should begin to weaken down to a depression and then continue to weaken as it pushes further off to the north. So that is the latest track as of the 11 o'clock hour. We'll be back here to update you with a new update at the 2 p.m. hour when the National Hurricane Center puts out its latest update. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions at all, email them to us, send them to us on our social media pages. We'll be happy to answer anything you need.